Okay, so now we're going to go into the management section of the software. So in the management section, if you have the rights and privileges to go in here, it allows you to then be able to configure everything that you want to do. So for example, users. If we want to go in here and say, okay, John Doe has a user ID of this, his first name, his last name, what his email address might be, what password you want to create for him if you want to do this manually, and I'll explain that in a second, or what groups he might belong to. So he belongs to the officers group, and then what rights and privileges he has. Now if you notice here, if I check a couple of boxes on my own, we've actually got a green check mark versus some of the others which actually have a green square in them. What this signifies is that these green squares are rights and privileges that he inherited by belonging to a group or multiple groups, because he can actually belong to more than one. Whereas the check mark reflects these are rights and privileges that are given to him uniquely. In other words, for example, let's say you have a sergeant's group. Well, all the sergeants will have the rights and privileges to do certain things, but maybe you have a shift sergeant that has some unique things that he needs to accomplish based on his title, and so you want to give him certain unique things, then you can do that individually to him as a user. So that's the difference between a green box and a check mark. If we go here to groups, you can see here we got chiefs and officers. So if we click on officers, you can see the title that we've given it. You can see what users belong to there. There will be many at some point inside of her. In this case, we've only got John Doe. If we go to rights, once again, they're now check marks because these are individual or specific to this group of officers. At this point, if you want to say, you know what, they don't have the rights to export or import anymore, that's like fine. If they don't have the right to, if they don't have the right to burn a DVD anymore, then that's available as well. So all of this allows you then to configure the system to allow users to do certain things and of course not other things. One of the biggest questions that we get from the IT side is Active Directory sync. So yes, the software does have the capability to synchronize with your domain server. At this point, we are not logged into the server. So what we're going to do then is just hit cancel. Now, if I had logged in and I have proper rights and privileges to your domain, I would see all your groups. I would see DA, IT, SWAT, traffic, or anything else for that matter. And so I would also see all the users that relate to that. Once I click on Add Group, if I brought over IT, for example, then I would see all the IT users in that group. I could bring over officers, and I would see all the officers in, or rather all the users that are in that group. Once I click on Synchronize, the system will bring in all those users and all those groups into the system. At that point, you just simply go to the group, you simply give them the rights and privileges, and all the users that are related to that particular group will automatically inherit the rights and privileges. That allows you to then set up hundreds or thousands of officers in one fell swoop. Folders. Here's where this allows you to then set up your workflow and your organization environment. So for example, DUI. We've created a folder called DUI. Inside of here, then, we can specify what storage location we want it to go to. In this case, it's just the default storage location. But this could actually be a NAS, a network attached storage. It could be a SAN, a storage area network. We can specify how many days it's going to live for in this particular storage location. In this case, we're saying 120 days. If you want, we can go in here and we can simply change this to 365 days. We can then also specify who has the rights to see this or who's restricted. So for example, let's say that John Doe has some DUI videos that he created, but now he's under investigation, Internal Affairs gets involved. You can ultimately then restrict this user from having access, even though he may be the owner of some of these files within the DUI folder. Officers under the group, though, would have access to that. And even if John Doe belonged to the officers group, he is specifically restricted, so he still would not have access to that. What's nice about the system, though, is we can determine where we want the assets to go next. So, for example, after 365 days of being in the DUI folder and giving access to these people, or restricting them, we can then say, okay, what's going to happen next? Well, in this case, we're saying we want it to go to the recycle bin, which basically means it's going to be removed from the system, or at least give us the option to do that. But you might want to say, no, you know what? I want to create another folder called litigation. Well, you can do that. In this example, though, we just have homicide on here, and we'll say, okay, after 1 year, I want it to go to the homicide folder. Now, anything that's associated with the homicide folder, for example, this is make permanent, and security-wise, nobody has access to it right now, but basically it's inheriting all the rights and privileges of what homicide says to do. So it's going to live in the DUI environment for 1 year, and after that it moves over here to homicide. If you want to change this, we can simply remove make permanent. Now it's going to go to the recycle bin, and we say, you know what, I want this to live for an additional 120 days. So then you can start to see how you create that workflow in the system. Now, one of the nice things about the system is you do have one last possibility. In the recycle bin, some departments choose to say, you know what, I don't want the system to automatically purge the assets. I want to be able to manually do that. Okay, great. Well, then you can set up the security rights for, let's say, the captain or the chief or the sergeant, whoever you deem as accountable for the recycle bin. You're going to give them access. So let's just say it's the administrator at this point. What we're then telling the system is any asset that finally goes into the recycle bin because it's lived through its lifespan of 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, are now going to go in here, and ultimately then the admin has to be able to go to the recycle bin and remove those assets manually. Some departments are going to say, you know what, we don't want that. We want them to automatically be purged from the system. Great, then we remove the make permanent. We go over here and we say, you know what, I don't want to have a buffer of any kind. So the moment it goes to the recycle bin, they get shredded. That is one of the things about the system. It does not mark them for deletion and allow Windows or the hard drives to overwrite them at some point. It actually shreds them. And we do this by design because we want to make sure that no attorney, defense, or prosecution can say, you know what, we think those files are still on your hard drive. We want to subpoena them, request them, forensically try and find the assets. No, we shred them. They are gone. But as a department say, well, you know what, we may make a mistake. I want to go ahead and give us an additional 30-day buffer. Fair enough. What you're telling the system is then after, again, it goes through DUI, homicide, whatever it is, for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, then go to the recycle bin, live for 30 more days, and finally after the 31st day, it will go ahead and delete those assets from the system. So you have that flexibility within the software to determine how long you want them to live for and how and when they're going to finally be shredded from the system and from your storage. Associations. So one of the nice things about the system is, if you remember earlier, we talked about tags and bookmarks. Well, in associations, this allows you to actually go in and associate metadata and move them to specific folders. So in this example, you can see here, we created a DUI association. And anything that gets classified with DUI, I then want that to go to the DUI folder. Well, if you remember on the DUI folder, everything that's in here is going to live for 120 days. It's going to go to this storage location, and here's who has access to it or is restricted from it. So by simply using the association section, anything that you tag, again, that could be hundreds of photos, video clips, whatever you want, with DUI, it's going to go ahead and go to the DUI folder and inherit all the workflow and all the things that we just mentioned a second ago. So in here, then, this allows you to set up all your classifications and move assets to different storage locations, be maintained or retained for different periods of time. So for example, a speeding ticket or moving violation, you might want to keep that for 120 days. DUIs, keep it for 1 year. Fatality, keep it for 5 years. Officer-involved shooting, keep it forever. However you want to set up your software, it's yours to configure as you see fit. Tags. Here's where you can start to set up your environment. So if we go up in here to case number, we've created a tag called case number. There's a couple of things you might want to be able to do in here. So we can enforce tags on import. So if you remember earlier, we went through the import section. One of the things some departments want to have is the flexibility of saying you can't import any assets into the system unless you put in specific metadata. In this case, we're saying you must have a case number. That way you're not importing hundreds or thousands of assets with no meaningful metadata. This forces them to put in something that they can search by and have meaning to it. So the other thing you can do is require a tag validation. So just like you do with a password confirmation, you can go in now and say, okay, if I add a case number, it's going to force them to put in that case number twice, giving them less chance of putting in the wrong case number with that specific information. The other thing we can do is put in a minimum length and a maximum length. So I'm actually going to go ahead and change this to 10. And the other thing we can do is we can put in a default. So if your case numbers start off with CN 14 for the year and then dash whatever, and this is the remainder of the case number, we can simply hit apply to that. What that now allows us to do is if we go back to an asset of interest, we can go in here and tag it like we showed in the previous video clip. Actually, that already has a case number. We'll go to a different one. You can see here there's no case number. So now we can click on add. We're going to go ahead and specify case number. And now you can see there's the default CN14 for this year. And now I can put in 54321. And of course I would have to put in again correctly in order for this to take effect. Now this case number is associated with this particular asset. So just by simply creating that environment through my tags, it forced them to put in that tag number correctly and at least save them a little bit of typing by putting in the default section that's there. When 2015 comes around, you can simply go in here and change that to 15 and go from there. So all of that is available simply through the configuration of the software. The other choices, or the other tags that you can do, is actually one called choices. So here we've created a tag called classifications. We selected this as a choice tag, and now here's where you can create your environment with moving violation, red light, DUI, again, whatever your terminology is, DWI it could be, you can set these up and you can virtually create an unlimited number of choices from within the system. So at this point then, that's now a choice tag. You can see here there's 3 choices that are in there versus the case number, which is just a text tag, and you can see what information we've put in there regarding that. File extensions. One of the powerful things about the software is being able to create file extensions. What this means is that any digital asset, and if you remember I keep saying asset because it could be video files from Panasonic, Genetec from a WMS system, it could be a Pelco from Cisco. These are all video files that are coming in from other sources. It could be photographs like a JPEG or a GIF, a PNG, whatever that is. It could be an audio file. So whatever that is inside of there, ultimately, we might come up with one from a liquor store or a bank that we don't recognize it. Okay, great. We're simply going to go down here and click on Add. You're going to point to a file sample, which might be on your D drive, it might be on your thumb drive, your DVD, wherever that is, that's fine. I'm simply going to go into the C drive. We're going to go down to, let's see here, we'll maybe go to, is there some sample music? There we go. So you can see here, it automatically recognized that this is an MP3 and it's an audio file, although we do already have that extension right there. So you know what, let's pick a different sample. We're going to go in here and, actually, you know what, I've got an idea. Let's go to the C drive and go to Program Files, go to Cisco, and here's a here's an XSD, which I don't even know what that is. So we'll double click on that. You can see here it recognized this XSD extension. It allows me to put in a brand type. Let's just say it's Cisco because I went into that folder. I can put in a description and you could say this came from Bank of America in Los Angeles. We can then specify, well, what kind of file type is this? Is this an image? Is it audio? Is it video? Is it a document? Or is it other? Well, we'll say it's an audio file. We can then do a quick test to see, can our player and our codec library handle this, or do we have to use a third-party software, which then would be the Windows default. So then this allows us to associate all XSD files within the Wolfcom management system to be able to say, okay, any file we get that has an XSD extension, it's an audio file, and then this is the program we're going to use to play it back. Do we want to show thumbnails? Our options. Enable for import, allow direct access, allow conversion to standard media, or burn to DVD. Excuse me. These are all samples of what we can do with virtually any digital asset that is out in the market today. If we don't support it, we will take the time to integrate it, or again, there might be a third-party player that can handle that within the system. Reports. So one of the most important things in the system is to be able to generate reports and or custom reports. As you saw earlier, we can generate a canned chain of custody report related to the asset. But in here, you might want to say, wait a minute, we had a retention policy for DUIs for 120 days, like you saw, and I changed it to 365. Well, what you can do then is say, okay, I want to see everything that all users did, or in this case, I'm logged in as the admin, and I want to see everything that he did for today. So now, if I click on Create, you can see here the admin logged in at this time and date. He viewed this asset. He created a tag instance called DUI for this asset. So if I go to the last page, you can see here, modified the template, enforced tag on import, if you remember the example I gave you for the case numbers. Required validation for the case numbers. I changed the length from 4 to 6 to 4 to 10. So you can see everything that I did while I was doing this presentation was all monitored, and the chain of custody was created, or anything and everything that I did to the system. So everything in the system is audited. If I just want to say, okay, I want to see everything that was burned to DVD, and only that, I can simply right mouse click on it, clear all, check off this one thing. I could say, okay, I want to see all assets that were burned to DVD over the weekend. I don't want a specific user. We can just go back to none, and now generate that report and show everything that was done for burning the DVD. So you can start to see how you can customize your reports with everything and anything that was done to it. You can see if I expand each and every one of these, it's a very long list because there are many things you can do within the system. That pretty much covers the key features of the management system for the Wolfcom management software. It's very robust, and ultimately at the end of the day, it allows you to configure the software with what you need and what you see fit to make your job easier and more efficient. If you have any other questions, we're here to answer those for you. Thank you.